Hi guys, hi everyone watching today. I just kind of wanted to do a quick introduction before I show you today's interview with Jemimah, one of my recovered clients from DPDR that honestly has such a beautiful recovery story, such a beautiful message to share. I'm so proud of her, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear the value that I'm about to share or that she's about to share with you. So yeah, today's interview turned out a bit longer than the other ones, but I want to encourage you to watch the entire thing. Jemimah's going to go into a lot of her experience with DPDR, which I know is, on the one hand, sometimes can be a bit difficult to hear because obviously she's going to share about her symptoms and what she went through. But I want you to hear her story from a perspective knowing that she is completely recovered, that she's doing really well, and staying tuned for the last, I guess, half of the video where she's going to share you all about her tips and what helped her and the mindset that she adopted for her to be able to recover. One thing that she still asked of me to share that she felt like she kind of forgot to mention in the end was how much importance she values on the relationship that you build with yourself, and that she really had to learn to rely on herself to get herself out of it, which is something that she talks a little bit about, but she still wanted to kind of stress on how important that was for her. So feel free after this interview to ask her questions in the comments. She'll be there to answer them for you. And yeah, I hope you guys really enjoy this recovery story. All right. So first of all, how are you feeling today? How are you?
Yeah, I'm feeling all right, thank you. I feel a bit overwhelmed because I've been quite busy recently, but that's a good thing because I
That's
haven't
a
been
good.
able to do a lot of stuff for a long
Yeah.
time. So I'm a photographer, so I work for a jewelry company and I do photography for them and social media and things like that. So
Mhm.
freelance mainly, yeah.
Yeah. Did you find it difficult to maintain that work when you were kind of going through DPDR? And how is that like now that you're kind of coming out of it and being recovered?
Yeah, so I didn't work for most of it really. I just did freelance work here and there, which was a massive blessing because that meant I could work whenever I felt able to. But I did do a lot of work. So yeah, now feeling like I have the capacity to do what I love and do work is amazing. I just appreciate it so much more. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and you're really good at what you do. I'm gonna link your Instagram in the in the description of this video, like for everyone to see your beautiful pictures that you take. So it's nice that the world has your blessing of being fully present back, so you can get back at doing what you do best. For the people obviously that don't know you and your story, I personally think that you're one of the most incredible people I've ever worked with, and just how quickly you were able to turn your situation around, and how you went from being in such a dark place to being where you are now, obviously shining bright like the sun, and just your happy and lovely self again. So why don't you just share a little bit about your experience struggling with DPDR, like when it started, how long you had it, like what your symptoms were, and just kind of giving people an idea of what it was exactly that you were really struggling with.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a long story because it's been 2 years in total. But essentially, I started with depression. So I was already really depressed before I got DPDR. So I was sort of at a point where I thought I was rock bottom already. And I just thought I can't get any worse than this. Like I'd never been depressed in my life, and I became depressed very quickly all of a sudden. So it was very weird to me, and it felt really extreme. So I just thought it can't get any worse than these feelings. Like it was scaring me so much already. um but essentially, I got DPDR very quickly because I've heard a lot of people say that they have DPDR sort of gradually, like they start getting symptoms and they don't really know what it is. They're sort of Googling here and there. But for me, it was quite literally overnight. I went to sleep one night and then literally the next morning I woke up and couldn't recognize my house. I couldn't recognize my parents. My clothes and my wardrobe didn't feel like mine. I had a package come through the post that said my name on it and my address, and I just was like, oh my gosh, that does not feel like me. I was looking at photos on the wall of myself and I was like, who is that person? Like, it was so scary because it was so sudden and I just had no idea what was happening. I was convinced I was losing my mind. And because I'd had this depression that was also came on quite quick, I sort of already had that fear of kind of like losing my mind and like that my mind was out of control. So suddenly having this where it really did feel like my mind was out of control, I was just to that point I was absolutely convinced something was seriously wrong. So that kind of intense DPDR lasted for like 5 days. But during that time, I was like throwing up. I was so scared. I couldn't sleep. It was just like the most terrifying 5 days of my life, probably. But I was also actually on medication as well at this point. So it was quite difficult to know. I thought it was the medication, to be fair. So I came off the medication and then the symptoms kind of like went slowly. So I was like, oh, okay, like, that must have been the medication and that was fine. But I knew that I'd had an experience that was going to stay with me because I just was like, after it had gone, I just was like, what on earth just happened? Like, I didn't even know you could experience anything like that. So I was kind of terrified of the after effects of that. So then I was still struggling with mental health, like still struggling with depression and things like that. And then DPDR kind of came back gradually after that. So the following months, I started to feel more and more depersonalized. Then that's probably 5 months after this, or 4 months after this, I think. I then had a really, really bad panic attack that lasted like 2 hours. And that set off the DPDR really, really bad from then for like another year, basically. So it's kind of like 2 years in total. But yeah, I'd had that from that panic attack. It was like everything came back. And yeah, that's when the whole like nightmare kind of started of it being chronic as well, like no episodes or anything. This was like a chronic state in my mind 24/7. And that's what I found really hard as well, because I saw other people online talk about like when they would dissociate. And I was like, I don't dissociate. Like, I am just dissociate. Like, I just feel like I'm in this other realm and like I can't come out of it. So I was almost like jealous of people that would talk about these episodes where they dissociate, because I was like, oh, like it's just not like that for me. And like, why isn't it like that for me? And there was a lot of like fear when I would like compare myself to other people, because I felt like other people didn't have the same symptoms as me. It didn't feel quite the same. But I think
it's interesting because I feel like there's a very good thing and a very bad thing about that, where people that get breaks from it can see that it's possible for them to not have it. But at the other hand, the moment that someone that is experiencing it chronically starts to feel differently, then they'll be more likely to really take that seriously, where someone that is having breaks all the time will probably always have this lingering fear of like, but like it's probably gonna come back. Whereas for you, maybe it felt a bit more authentic of like, oh, I'm finally starting to feel differently, like I'm finally starting to get relief, or it's starting to go down, and that kind of makes you feel more hopeful. And
yeah, and I think because it was so bad and so extreme, it was like I had so much determination to come out of it. Like not coming out of it wasn't an option for me. Whereas I think maybe if I just had the symptom of like feeling a bit spaced out, feeling a bit weird, I think maybe I would have been like, oh, I can just deal with it, like it's fine. But I was like forced to get better, basically, because it was so bad. And I think also something that you said to me was that you noticed that like my case was sort of maybe a bit worse than other people that you've seen. And that was almost like reassuring for me, because when I would compare myself to people online talking about their story, I was like, okay, why don't they have this symptom that I have? Or why are they not talking about it like I've had it? And I genuinely thought I've got like a certain type that you can't recover from. I've got like the worst type. And I think everyone says that. They think they've got the type that you can't recover from. But it was like kind of reassuring for you to be like, no, you have just got a really bad case of DPDR.
yeah, well, it's super subjective as well. Like it's something you can't really rank. And
yeah,
thing is too, I don't put any labels on a connection between how long you've had it or how intense it is and your ability to recover, because you obviously are someone that really had a really strong recovery, and you're just because of your own input and how determined you were and how quickly you just kind of turned things around for yourself. And you were really like in a very intense DPDR experience, where other people, like you say, might sometimes have breaks or just kind of have it more mildly. So there's also no, to the people watching, I mean, we have the same kind of idea like Jemimah of, my case is worse than anyone's. Like, that's no excuse, because she had a really bad case of it. She like couldn't recognize her family at a point, and could not recognize herself or anything. And she's sitting here now a few months later and like putting out the proof of it. So what were your symptoms? Like, if you could describe it all, like kind of what you went through. I know it's difficult, but everyone that's watching probably also can relate. So
Yeah.
like, what were your symptoms? What exactly did your DPDR feel like or look like for you?
So I wrote a long list because there's so many, but I really wanted to say as many as I could, because I want to, for anyone watching, I want you, like, if you have a symptom that you think people don't have, like, I want to be able to say all of them, because like when I was watching recovery videos, I was like, please mention this symptom. Yeah, I'm just gonna go. I mean, there's so many, but
Yeah,
obviously you can
let's go through it.
but yeah, just as like an overview. Um, so my surroundings didn't feel real. I felt like I was living in a fake world. Felt like I was living in a dream. I felt like I couldn't control my actions properly or talk to people properly. Like, I sort of felt like I was watching myself do it, but like I wasn't fully in control. And I remember being so terrified that I was going to randomly say something or do something that I wasn't in control of. Um, People around me like didn't feel real, like especially when I was in crowds. I remember being in London once, like around a really touristy bit, and I was so overwhelmed. I was just looking at all these people. I was like, how can so many people exist in like one space? And it was like everyone was robots, and I was like watching people's like interactions as if I was watching a film, you know, people like are talking in the background. I was like, are they actually real? Like, it was so scary. Like, being anywhere in public was so triggering. Yeah, I felt like I was watching everything, but I wasn't in it. Yeah, my family felt like complete strangers. Like, even when I would look at photos of them, it was like I knew who they were, but like I was like, I don't know these people. And that was, I mean, by far the worst symptom, because that's like, you know, the most important thing in life is like your relationships with people. So that was like just so horrible. It was so awful. Yeah, and then because I'd had such a bad experience with like feeling like my family weren't real, or like I didn't know them. I remember like I couldn't watch any films to do with families. I remember watching like Cheaper by the Dozen, and like I couldn't watch it because obviously it's all about family, and like I had so many intrusive thoughts. I was like, you know, I just like such weird thoughts about like families and like relationships and just stuff like that. Um, yeah, so same thing with my house. Couldn't like recognize my house, even though that was the house that I'd grown up in my whole life. Just felt really weird. I felt like I had no connection towards it. And I actually couldn't go home for a year, because it was so triggering going home. So every time I came back, I had to like meet my parents outside of the house. I couldn't like go back in the house. Every time I'd go back in the house, I would dissociate so badly. And obviously it's like all the intrusive thoughts as well was so horrible, because I was constantly checking, like I would look at every photo of myself on the wall and be like, is that definitely me? Like, do I definitely recognize myself? Like, do I definitely feel like this is my house? Like, it was just like so torturing having these thoughts all the time. I just couldn't deal with it. Yeah, so same for like my hometown, and like places didn't feel real. Like, I'd think about a place and I was like, is that actually a real place, or is that just something I've like made up in my head? And yeah, so coming back to like my hometown was like very triggering. Like, the concept of the world and the concept of space, and I think a lot of people have these kind of existential fears. But I couldn't watch any like nature programs. I couldn't talk about anything like that, because I just, everything just felt like that can't be true, like that can't be real. And it wasn't even just like it was a bit weird to me, it was like actually terrifying. Like, when I would think about it, it would almost send me into a panic attack, because I just thought that can't be real. And everything just felt so scary. Like, things that weren't scary just felt absolutely terrifying. I had such weird fears and such weird thoughts. Like, like I remember looking at the sky, and like I'm sure loads of people have had this. I was like, I can't believe the sky is blue and that it's like never going to change color. Like it's always going to be blue my whole life. And that really scared me. I was just like, oh my gosh, like the sky's always going to be blue. Like, and like, why is the sky blue? Like, why is it that specific color? And like, just really normal things. I was just thinking about them in like a whole new way and getting really scared by them. Um,
I had a session with someone yesterday and she had a similar symptom. And I asked her, like, okay, well, let me give you the creative wand of freedom. Like you can choose whatever color, in your case, like whatever color the sky is, like, would you change it? And she's like, well, no. And that's the funny thing, because you realize like the problem isn't life, because if you actually got to be able to change anything, you wouldn't touch anything because you're also afraid of things changing in a way. So it's funny how your mind just latches onto to things that and calls it a problem when if you got the freedom to change it, you probably wouldn't. It's just this hyper fixation on everything.
Yeah, and I think I had to like remind myself in those moments, like, Jemima, it's not the world hasn't changed, it's your brain. Like, because I just thought, why is everything? It felt like everything was changing and everything was different, but it was like, no, nothing's changed in the world. Everything's the same as it was. It's just my brain. Like, I just need to focus on that, going back to normal. So that was, I just had to like remind myself of that. Because I was like, if I can go through my whole life knowing all these things, I'm pretty sure I can go back to knowing them and being okay with it. So yeah, same sort of thing, like society, like I was like questioning why we do things in society, like just really like thinking about such simple things but feeling like they were just really weird. So yeah, I had times where I felt like um my whole personality was just lost. Like I sometimes just felt like I was a body, like I was just like living in a body, but I had no personality. I had no like inner kind of, I don't know, I couldn't like connect with myself, like who I actually was, what I actually thought. I couldn't remember what my opinions were about things sometimes, or like my whole sense of self was just off. And I also had like really, I had it really bad at night. Like DPDR was like sometimes really awful at night. I don't know why, but like I would wake up in the middle of the night and just like sometimes I would lie there and just think like I feel like there is nothing in me, like there's nothing going on in me, like I just felt like I was a body, and that would just send me into like a panic. And yeah, so I would like wake up in the night a lot because I was also like obviously really anxious, so I couldn't sleep. And then in the night I feel like your thoughts are always just a bit weird at night time, so that was terrifying, like waking up in the middle of the night and then just feeling like that again, of like everything not being real. I was like, where, like sometimes I wouldn't know where I was when I woke up in the night. Yeah, so it was really scary. um all of my memories felt like they weren't me. So yeah, I would like look back at photos and look back at stuff that I did, and it was like I knew it was me because I could obviously remember it, like I could remember that I did that, and like I know that was me, but it didn't feel like me at all. Like I felt like it was some other person, like in a past life. Like everything before DPDR just felt like a past life. That's the only way that I could describe it. I felt really like not connected to that version of myself, and I'd like look back at photos and think like, oh, I can't believe I did that. Like, did I actually do that? Like, was that actually me? Like, do I definitely remember being in that place? Like, I just, yeah, it was so scary, and I just didn't think I would ever feel like connected to that again. Like you just think it's permanent. You just feel like it's, you're stuck like that, and it's yeah, that was horrible. Um yeah, just convinced that I was going insane for the whole time. Like, I don't think I ever thought like, oh, this is just EPDR and like, I'll probably get better and it's just this, or like, I didn't think that. Like, I was absolutely 100% convinced that there was something wrong with me. When I had panic attacks, felt like I was literally going insane, and I thought that I'd have to go to a mental hospital. I thought I'd end up in hospital. And like it sounds like I'm being really dramatic and everything, but like
That's the one that almost all my clients have, like the fear of
yeah,
the almost like thought of like this is where I will end up, like the fear of that. It's something very, I think a lot of people watching will probably relate to that.
yeah, yeah. I was convinced that I was going like it's just so weird how no one could have said anything to me to make me think that I was normal. Like the thoughts I was having, like, and as well, I think what else I had is like because obviously DPDR, essentially like dissociation, is the freeze response. My panic attacks didn't look like the fight or flight panic attacks that you hear about, that's like what most people have, of like the whole hyperventilating and like can't breathe, like my panic attack, I didn't even realize they were panic attacks because they weren't like that, and I would basically completely dissociate like so badly, and I like the thoughts I would have would be like racing through my mind. I'd have like 1,000 thoughts a minute, and yeah, and basically just felt like I was going insane, like I was sort of like spiraling. But I wasn't, like, if someone was looking at me, they wouldn't think I was having a panic attack, but in my mind I was like going crazy. So that was really weird, because I was like, what is going on? And I realized that, oh, that also is a panic attack, but it just didn't look like one, because it was almost like a freeze panic attack. So yeah, in those panic attacks, I was like, yeah, convinced that I would have to go to hospital, and like I almost had to like accept it. I remember like coming to a point where I was like, okay, if I like go into a mental hospital, then I'll be in a hospital, and like I'll just have to have treatment, and hopefully I'll make it through. Like I just literally got to a place where I was like, okay, if that happens, that happens. Like
it's interesting too, because like if you think about that worst case scenario happening, like it's not that bad to be in a mental hospital. Like they can help you there probably. Well, with DPDR, you never know because it's such a foreign topic still, but it's good to kind of like counter that idea and actually go into it and say like, okay, well, if I go crazy, then I'm probably in the best care possible being in a mental health hospital,
yeah, and what was I going to say? Yeah, I think because I mean, I felt like I was at complete rock bottom anyway. So I thought, if I go to hospital, then I can't really, it's not going to make much difference. Like
yeah.
I'm already kind of there. Like I don't know. Oh yeah, so with the whole thing of like questioning everything, I basically felt like I was viewing everything for the first time, or like seeing everything for the first time, as if I was like an alien, like coming to Earth and like seeing everything for the first time, and then being like, oh, why is that like that, or whatever. And I remember quite early on, like when I was having the symptoms and not knowing what it was, I was like sat at the doctor's, and he was like, asking me about how I was feeling, whatever. And then I was like, I just feel like I'm seeing everything for the first time. And I think he was just like, okay, like typing it on his computer, but like clearly it was like, what, like, and he didn't obviously say anything about dissociation. Like it's just like people don't really know what you're talking about. So that was like really not reassuring when someone's listening to you talk about your symptoms. And they're just like, okay.
I think that's part of why people get the fear of going crazy, because it works so reassuring. For example, I'm imagining a lot of people watching this going like, oh my goodness, this is exactly how I feel, or I really relate to this, which then makes you feel like not alone or not going crazy. Whereas if you're sitting at a doctor's office or in a hospital describing your symptoms and they're just kind of going like, okay.
Yeah.
Then you're going crazy because they don't understand, and they can't, and you can't blame people that don't understand, because it is something that you almost have to like really have experienced yourself to even begin to like understand what it feels like. So it's normal that doctors or physicians can't really grasp the concept, but sitting there already feeling completely out of it, explaining to someone that you see as an authority figure that will help you, kind of going like, okay, is like the worst feeling in the world.
Yeah, and it just made it so much worse, because then I was like, okay, this really is bad. Like if a doctor is like not understanding what I'm saying, like I think, yeah, and I think like if I didn't have the internet, like if I'd had this like way back when, before the internet or whatever, I just think, oh my gosh, I don't know how, like I dread to even think about it, because I think it's the only reason that I've gotten through this is because I was able to look it up and research, and then obviously find you, which has been like life-saving. So yeah, it is a bit scary how a lot of people in those kind of positions in like mental health and some of them don't even understand it or know what it is. And I think I feel really passionate about making it like just like making more awareness on it, because it's so many people are suffering with it, and yet so many people in those positions like still haven't really heard of it. And I think, like you say, like if you haven't been through it, you don't really understand, you don't really get it. Like it is one of those things where like if you've been through it, you totally get it, but if you haven't, it's hard to help someone. And I did have a therapist like in that like last year for a few months, and she kind of like had dissociation on like one of the things that she helps with, but I think honestly it didn't help me. I think it probably maybe made me worse, I don't know, because she, yeah, obviously hadn't experienced it herself. So I just felt like when I would talk to her, she wasn't kind of giving me that like reassurance or anything. Like she was saying certain things, but it was not at all like the help I needed. And then another thing that was really scary is that she mentioned, she was talking about like medication, because sometimes people mention like medication for DPDR, and then she was like talking about going on antipsychotics and things like that. And thankfully I was like, no, like I'm not going on medication. But it's quite, I think it is quite scary when someone's suggesting that to you, because you think, oh, does that mean I'm psychotic? Like, does that mean there must be something wrong?
Yeah, I've heard, I think I literally heard another client talk about that this week, of like someone describing, like prescribing them antipsychotics, and it just kind of completely freaking them out. But yeah, I think everything you're saying is making a lot of sense to a lot of people. And I like that you are taking the time to kind of really go into the symptoms, because I tend to like really focus these interviews on kind of the recovery process and getting out of it. But I think that feeling understood in your symptoms and seeing that someone that has been recovered had felt exactly what you're feeling, and you know, you're not going crazy, and that is actually also really reassuring. So
yeah, because I think I just remember feeling like I wanted someone who had recovered to describe the symptoms that I'd had, especially with not recognizing people and things like that, because that was the one that I thought, how am I ever like I feel like I'm never going to be able to like heal from this. Another thing that was really, really hard, along with the kind of like not feeling connected to people, was like that sense of love for people. Like I just couldn't connect with feeling like I loved the people that were close to me, and that was so awful. And like I honestly do think that for me it was the worst part of DPDR, because I think feeling spaced out, feeling like you're having all these weird thoughts or whatever, that is awful, but it's not kind of like hitting at your values or like hitting at kind of like the really core things like close to your heart. So yeah, feeling like I couldn't really connect with people, like feel that love for people, like I just felt so numb. Like I think that was probably what contributed to like feeling suicidal when I had DPDR, because I just thought like, what is the point of like being alive if I can't be connected to the people closest to me? Like that to me is like the most important thing of life, is like, you know, who we share life with. So that was just horrible. Not and I also felt like I was like playing a role, and like felt like I was being fake. Like when I was with people and like kind of like chatting or like hugging people, like I just felt like this is not being authentic. I'm not feeling like I'm being authentic. Like I'm just playing a role of myself but not being myself. And that was made it so hard to spend time with people. That was just so horrible. And obviously when you're in that, you can't also tell that to someone. You can't really say, oh, by the way, like I just feel like I don't really love you. But it's just not true. Like I knew it wasn't true, but like you can't say to someone like, oh, I feel like I don't really recognize you right now, like I feel like I don't really know you. Because if ever I spoke about it, or like that's why I didn't speak about it, because as soon as I would speak about it, I would panic, because I was like, oh my gosh, this is real. And then I would dissociate even more. Like talking about dissociation made me dissociate. So I just couldn't talk. So that's why it was so isolating as well, because you just feel like no one is understanding this. Like I can't even tell, because like usually when you're struggling with something, you can like open up to the people closest to you, be like, look, I'm really like going through this, and then you feel supported. But I feel like this is one thing where you can't really get that same level of support, because no one can really understand that experience if they haven't been through it. It's such an experience that you never think you're going to go through as a human. Like you don't expect to go through something like that in life. Like, you know, you think, oh, maybe, you know, I'll go through grief or loss or like all these like illness or all these difficult things, but you never think that like oh, maybe I'll wake up one day and I not recognize people or not. You know what I mean? You don't ever think that's going to happen. So it's like impossible to explain it to someone because they just think what are you talking about? So that was I felt so isolated in the whole process. And then I'll just mention as well, like never feeling safe was a huge one. And I think, yeah, for 2 years, like I never ever felt safe, like constantly. And I think living in that constant state is so exhausting and so draining that even when you're in a safe environment and even when you're doing something that you would normally find really comforting, like for me, like it would be like, you know, sitting at home on the sofa, like watching like a throwback film or something, like that was my like always my safe thing, or like, you know, doing something really lovely. Nothing I did I could relax and enjoy it. I couldn't enjoy anything. I felt so on edge all the time. I felt like I was unsafe. I just felt like something was bad was about to happen all the time. Now on the other side of it, like I have such an appreciation for like the small things that bring me joy, and just being able to actually relax is like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. Yeah.
What was the moment that you felt like things were starting to turn around, and what do you feel like was enabling that to happen within you? Like what changed, and can you just kind of walk like the people watching this through that for you?
Yeah, so I mean, it was definitely when I started to work with you, and I'm not just saying that for the video. No, this is 100% coming from me. This is 100% coming from
Okay.
me. No, but honestly, like I, yeah, I mean, I really didn't have any hope, and I think because for so long I didn't actually believe that I could recover. I was so unsure about whether it was even possible. So I think the first step for me was like seeing that, oh, this actually is possible, and like there's nothing wrong with my brain, so essentially I can actually heal myself. Like I don't need to kind of like, there's nothing kind of permanent going on, sort of thing. um and I think starting work with you, like obviously because you've been through it, that was like incredible in itself, because it was like someone who'd literally been through it and then was living like in freedom and living a life without it. So that gave me hope just in itself. And also I think it was so amazing, the attitude that you had for me was like, it wasn't like if you recover, it was like when you recover. Like I knew that my work with you was so that you could help me actually recover and get to the end. It wasn't like, oh, I'm just going to kind of be there along the way and like, you know, maybe. It was like I felt so confident that you had confidence in me that I could recover, and that you sort of like knew that it was 100% possible. So I just immediately had so much more hope when I was having sessions with you, because I was like, this isn't actually as far off as I think. And I think like with my other therapist before, she wasn't like that at all. Like she never actually like reassured me that I could even recover. Like it was like sort of, it was a whole different attitude. So I think, yeah, having that was like incredible. And I think also I learned a lot. Like you taught me a lot about the brain, and I realized that I believed stuff about my brain that just like was not true. And like I honestly thought that like my brain was this separate entity that would kind of like just randomly do things without my permission, and like my brain could make me just feel, because I had felt like that the last 2 years. I felt like my brain had been like, okay, now we're going to feel like this, now we're going to feel like that, and you do feel so out of control. And then I remember, yeah, what you said to me, how you were like, your brain is literally just an information processor. So whatever you feed it, that's how it's going to operate. So if you are feeding it fear, if you're telling yourself you're not safe, your brain's going to then operate like you are constantly under threat. And like you can choose what you feed your brain, and you can choose what you tell it. And I mean, honestly, I think that alone was like so key in my recovery. I had no idea that that was the case, and I just felt so much more in control. And I was like, oh, I can actually change things for myself. Like my brain's not just going to take control now. So I think learning so much through you was like a massive turning point. Working with you, like I think I said a couple of times that it feels like a boot camp a little bit. Like it felt like, you know, we're doing this. It felt like a full-time job, honestly. And I think I really was in that state of like, my whole life right now is all about healing. And you know, every day I was working hard, like, you know, in my mind just constantly working. And I think you kind of have to be in a space where you have the capacity to even feel safe enough to put time into that. So I think just shifting things around in my life, and getting more capacity to recover, was really good. And then, like you said, it was weird because I'd had it for like a year and a half, 2 years, and then the actual recovery sort of was kind of quite short in comparison to that. But I honestly, it's literally from having sessions with you and everything that you taught me and everything that, like all the tools and everything, I think it just gave me back so much control. And then, like, just learning to feel safe in my body, learning to feel safety within myself was like huge. And I don't know, I think it took a while, and then it just kind of clicked, and then I was like, oh, like I can actually control my inner experience.
It's funny because I don't even do that much. I feel like most of what I do is I let you see that you can actually do it yourself by, giving you tools and things that, make you feel a bit more in charge. But I feel like your switch, the moment you realize, like, wait a minute, this is because of what I am like feeding myself in terms of information and emotions, and where I put my focus and the story I tell myself, and like the emotions I follow on a daily basis. That's when you really started to shift really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I meant with I've made videos in the past about this as well, like things I can see in people when I know, like, okay, now they're gonna recover very quickly. It's when they make that shift of like, I'm in control here. I'm going to take power. I'm going to be in charge of what information I feed myself. And then even someone that has had it for 2 years chronically can recover in a couple of months just when they take that power back, which is incredible to witness, as well as someone like watching you in your journey was so. I teared up so often in sessions, like when you made that shift, because I was like, she's doing it.
Honestly. And but I honestly think, like, what you taught me was like, so I can't even describe the value of what you taught me, and how that is like lesson, that's like stuff that you need for life. Like it wasn't, I think I thought, oh, this is just for DPDR, like this is just for sort of like recovering this for this thing. But the stuff you've taught me is almost like kind of what I needed to like know my whole life, like what I needed to hear my whole life. Because I think I recognized like I had a lot of like unhealthy kind of patterns before this, like even like years ago, like when I'd have anxiety, like I didn't realize what I was actually like telling my brain. And also I didn't realize how much I was letting my brain kind of dictate how I felt and what I thought about what was real and everything. So I think, yeah, the stuff that you've taught me is just so valuable for like my whole life. Like it's just changed how I just see my mind and like just anxiety. And it's so incredible. And I just think I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't have found you. Because yeah, I just feel like you really did give me those tools and teach me but I had to make that decision. And I think that's, you noticed me like when I finally made that kind of choice. But that's what's so amazing, because I think it's so different to like normal therapy, which is just a lot about talking, a lot about processing things. But I think you are like almost, you are more of a coach, I think, of like, I'm going to give you this, I'm going to give you that. If you do this every day, you've got, it's like you're sort of empowering people to make that choice and decide. And I think, yeah, I did get to a point where I was like, I have to choose this. And one of the things that was also really impactful was that, I can't remember what it was called, but it was that graph of like consciousness or something that you showed. Yeah, and that, I remember that being, it was like all the good things that lead to like enlightenment and recovery was like the top half, and then it was like the bottom half of just going down into depression. And that first step to get there, I remember you saying like, you don't just try and get to like the perfect stage of like everything's amazing. There's steps, and the first one was acceptance. And it took me so,
Acceptance, yes.
oh yeah. And it took me so long to accept that this was my reality. This had actually happened to me. This was my life now. I was so fighting it for so long. I was so angry. I just wanted to go back, and I couldn't accept that it was reality. But yeah, I had to like force myself to come into acceptance. Otherwise I wasn't going to move forward. And I remember you saying that you're literally going to be stuck in the same place. Like you have to accept that this is your reality now, and you can choose to make it better. And then I was like, oh, okay. But like actually doing it is like, yeah, I'm just like, oh, that's always going to be the better option is accepting and not fighting.
And you need time to get to that point as well, because I think I talk about acceptance like from the first session and in every video, but every person has a different journey of getting to that place, because there's a lot of like, it's very scary to accept something that feels unacceptable, and sometimes it's reassurance that you need, sometimes you have to work on deeper patterns or maybe like beliefs that you have that are blocking that. But once you get to that place, things can like start going rather like more quickly, which is what you're a really great example of. Like, what are some of the practical other things that helped you in, yeah, like your recovery process?
Yeah. So I think I've sort of like written three things down, which I think kind of encapsulates recovery for me. So the first one was kind of what I've already mentioned, was like the work I've done with you. So really learning about the brain and actually like reframing my beliefs about the brain and about the body and about like DPDI as a whole, and kind of learning what was true and what wasn't, and kind of understanding it, I guess, understanding. And then the second one was like sort of a bit of exposure therapy. So facing triggers, but so not kind of going all in to the point where I would get overwhelmed and panicked and kind of dissociate even more. Like I had to really do like a bit at a time. So for me, it was like going back home, seeing family and stuff was like hugely triggering, but I just did it in small stages, and naturally my brain started to realize that those things weren't dangerous anymore. So, but that was really hard. Like I think it sounds really easy, like, oh, you kind of just do it a bit at a time, but it was so, I had to force myself so many times to do things that I was terrified of. But yeah, obviously it got to a point where my brain saw the same thing, and was like, oh, this isn't scary anymore, when I used to be like terrified of things. So I think it's like doing those things that you're avoiding, but like don't go like all in and try and do all at once. I think definitely kind of do it in stages, but don't kind of give up on that, because if you kind of never face those things, obviously you're going to stay in the same place. So yeah, and I guess maybe you could do it for like being in crowds or anything that's triggering, because it's different for everyone. But then also if you have like the DPDR thoughts and feelings, it's like learning that they're not dangerous and it's not harmful. So you're able to be in the situation with the thoughts, with the feelings, and knowing that they're just trying to protect you at the end of the day. So accepting it, not being fearful of it, and then over time, obviously,
Yeah.
that changes. And then the third thing was restoring safety, like back into my body, and managing anxiety. So for me that looked like, well, doing safe space visualization was like amazing. That was so good. And then doing like just a lot of nature walks, but just being really like intentional with like my time, and just being outside, and doing yin yoga is like amazing, because that's just like really restorative, really slow. And I think I also like had to reframe how I saw exercise, because I think for many years I've always seen exercise as like that's to sort of like look a certain way or like to achieve some sort of goal. But I decided that like I'm going to do yoga, I'm going to do these things, but it's not at all linked to like my appearance or trying to get fit or anything. It was like I was moving my body just purely for the intention of restoring safety back into my body, and seeing my body in a different, like I'm not seeing it in that way, I'm seeing it in a way of like I need to care for it. And so yeah, definitely like the physical side of things was so powerful, just feeling safe. So I think those three things, yeah, kind of like a combination of those.
And also each reinforce each other, because like the exposure therapy is good if you also have a safety within you that you can fall back, you know,
Exactly.
or a therapist to
Yeah.
talk to, or so I think it's a good triangle like situation you had going on, of like having different things that work really well together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
So
think they all had to like, oh, sorry, I was just going to say, like, I think they all had to align. And I think for a while I was maybe, like you say, doing the exposure therapy without feeling that safe, knowing, having the tools to feel safe in my body. So then that wasn't really working. And then like I would try and do that, but then I think it all kind of aligned at the same time. And then that's why my recovery felt kind of quick. I think just because everything I'd been doing suddenly came together. So
That's
yeah.
beautiful. If you had to like say in one sentence or like one or two sentences, like what is the most important thing in DPDR recovery? I know it's personal and I don't want people to latch onto this too much, which is what you tend to do, but like how would you just in one core idea describe what is most important in DPDR recovery?
I think it is um I think it is exploring and understanding and taking time to um really learn and find out what it is, like why you have DPDR. Because I think I spent a lot of time, fighting reality, and I spent a lot of time angry because I was like, this is not my fault, this has happened to me, and it was like victim mentality, and this should have never happened to me, and this has like scarred me for life, and all this stuff, um,
Yeah.
and I think changing that and actually and it's a lot about caring for the inner child as well, like what is it that my inner child or like the inner me is actually terrified of. And I realized that that whole experience of me getting ill very quickly and all of that, like I realized that that was such a scary, terrifying experience for me. And so obviously I'm going to be scared and I'm going to be stuck in this scared state. That is why I'm dissociating and why I have DPDR. And so it's like there's a need there that needs to be met. So I think it's totally reframe how you see DPDR. I mean, I literally thought like, my brain is against me, this thing is trying to control my life, it's trying to ruin my life. I was really seeing it like that. And I think when I kind of shifted it more to, okay, what is this thing trying to get my attention, like, yeah, why is it trying to get my attention, like what is the need that I need to fill, and essentially, I mean, it is safety, it's feeling safe. And so many times when I got triggered, like when I was going through this recovery and I learned about this, when I would then get triggered, or dissociate or whatever, I would see it as like my inner child just being like, I'm really scared, like, and like I just need to feel safe right now, like I'm really terrified. And I would think about myself 2 years ago when I was in that place of being absolutely terrified. And then I would suddenly have like compassion, and I'd suddenly be like, oh my gosh, like, okay, I just need to take some time for you right now. Like this is, DPDR is essentially, complete overwhelm in your body, in your mind, and it's like almost screaming at you and saying like, can't, please, like, please, I need to feel safe, like I can't cope. So I think seeing it like that, it just creates so much more of a peaceful experience, because it's like, oh, okay, like I have control to heal this part of myself. And yeah, so I think it's definitely just changing how you see it. And compassion is so powerful. I mean, I, for the last 2 years, I've had an alarm go off on my phone, not like a loud alarm, just like a little reminder every hour with like an affirmation, and it would say like, you're going to live to see your healing, like don't give up, you're doing amazing. Like I'd have that come up on my phone like all day, because I like had to have such a strong relationship with myself, because no one else was going to save me, no one else was going to help me, like this was my thing, and I could not give up on myself in this process. So I think it's really like forming that relationship with yourself, and almost promising yourself like I'm never going to give up like on this, like I'm gonna work so hard to recover, because this is clearly something in me that needs safety and healing and peace. So yeah, definitely creating more of a, it's like a peaceful thing, it's not a conflict thing. I don't know if I've explained that well, but
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Like the final question I have for you, and what I guess is what people are also like looking to hear about, is how you are today and how you're feeling, and I guess how you look back on this entire journey today.
yeah. Yeah, so yeah, it's funny because like when I would watch these recovery videos and they would talk about this, I was just like, oh, am I ever gonna feel like that? So it's like amazing actually being on the other side of it. Like it is so surreal. But yeah, I would just say that like I have such a gratitude, and I know I mentioned it before, but yeah, I honestly do not take anything for granted at all. Like the most simple things in life suddenly feel so beautiful, so amazing, so lovely. And um I just, yeah, it's so sweet. Like life just feels so sweet. And I just, yeah, I just have such a different perspective. And I feel like I'm very like easily pleased now. Like I can be so content doing like the tiniest, smallest, simple thing, because I know what it's like to not be able to enjoy anything. And every day feel like I'm trapped in a nightmare. Like I know what that feels like. So to not have that is just crazy. Like I feel like I've been given like the biggest gift. Yeah, I just appreciate everything. And I feel like just in this process of like, you know, creating safety within myself and trusting myself and all of this, like I feel like I just have such a stronger relationship with myself. And I almost feel like, you know, anything that I go through now, um I feel like I'm going to be approaching it in just such a different way. And I think, yeah, I've built up just all these tools and the strength in myself. And I think because I haven't given up on myself in this process that's been just the worst thing that's ever happened. It's almost like anything that happens from now, I just know that I'm not going to give up. And um, yeah, I don't know.
That you have a great, strong inner coach in your corner now, like that you can be that for yourself, like both your compassionate caretaker and your like coach cheering you on of like you can do this now, that you have that within yourself. Like they always say that confidence comes from overcoming hard things and being there for yourself. That's super, super true. And that feeling of confidence and knowing you've done something really difficult and that you can tackle anything, that's what I think true safety feels like.
Yeah.
And that is what makes you recover in and of itself as well, because you feel safe in yourself to deal with anything.
Mm. Yeah, and I think I'm just like always reaching for an external source of help and safety, and like almost someone to save me, someone to like sort it all out and make it better. And I felt like I just can't do it. I can't do anything. I can't do it myself. Like, you know, my brain's against me. Like, you know, I'm a victim of all this stuff. And I think having completely, yeah, shifted this and um having experienced safety within myself and realizing that I can give all these things that I need is actually really within me. And it sounds so cliche, but it is so true. Um, and I think especially through the safe space visualization that you showed me, knowing that I could actually feel that inner experience of peace and that feeling had only come from myself was like, oh my gosh, like I really can take care of myself. Like it's just, yeah, it is so good.
Ah, this is beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing everything today. I always feel like really warm and like I'm so proud of you, Jemimah, like for everything you did and how you tackled this journey and how you're now helping someone else looking at this, like with your own experience. I feel like it's like the cherry on on top of the cake. So yeah, I really want to thank you for doing this interview with me today and for being so open and sharing everything. If people have like any questions for you, is it okay if they like leave a comment and for you to answer it?
Yeah, definitely.
That would be really great. So yeah, thank you everyone for watching and for being with us today. I hope everyone has a beautiful day, and thank you again so much, Jemimah, for doing this video together. Thank you guys so much for watching today. I hope everyone got some value out of this. I felt quite emotional today after this interview just because of how proud I am of Jemimah. And one last thing I wanted to mention, which is not really to do with this story, but usually after these stories, I get quite a lot of questions about coaching or like intake requests. For the moment, I have a waiting list, or I've had a waiting list for a couple of months. So if you need more urgent help, I will put a link in the description for my recovery course, which basically teaches you almost everything that you need to know to recover and more practical things to already get you started if you are looking for more urgent help. But if you, like Jemimah, are looking to do sessions with me, you can message me for an intake session, but it might take a little while for me to answer or be able to put you onto the waiting list, just so that you're aware that I, for the moment at least now, can't immediately offer you a spot. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say, and I hope you guys all have a beautiful day. I wish you so much love and light, and I'll talk to you guys on my next video.